right, you bastards. Strap in tight, because we're diving headfirst into the shit show that Georgian politics has become.
It's definitely a turbulent time.
Turbulent. We're talking about a president who went full-on rogue on the very party that got her elected.
Yeah. Salome Zurabichvili came in back in 2018 with the Georgian Dream Party's backing, but then she basically turned on them.
Started vetoing bills left and right, calling them out publicly, refused to play nice. It was a total power move.
It really was. She even refused to go on the diplomatic trips they set up for her. That's got to be a giant fuck you in diplomatic circles.
That finally snapped. Why'd things go from tense to total meltdown?
Well, the 2024 parliamentary elections happened, and she just straight up declared them fraudulent. Said, nope, not recognizing this bullshit.
Damn. So we've got a president who's at war with her own government? How the hell does that even work?
Well, see, that's where it gets even more messed up. Back in 2017, Georgia changed their constitution, and they went to this parliamentary republic system.
Okay, so for the folks who don't speak political science jargon, what's that mean?
It basically means the president's power got neutered. They're more of a figurehead than a real decision maker. No more calling the shots on the world stage. It's mostly symbolic now.
So she's fighting with a parliament that's already taken away most of her power. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah, pretty much. That sets the stage for the next crazy part of this story, how they elect the new president.
Ah, the Electoral College. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, but with a Georgian twist. They got this 300-person electoral college, but it's not just random citizens.
Who the hell is in it then?
It's members of parliament, local officials.
All right, so we've got this political shit show brewing in Georgia, but why should the rest of the world give a damn?
It's not just some local squabble. What happens in Georgia has ripples, man. Global ripples.
Okay, so enlighten us. Why should we give a shit about what's happening in some tiny country halfway across the world?
It's all about the bigger picture, see? Georgia's been trying to cozy up to the West for years. They want to be part of the EU. They want to get into NATO.
They want a taste of that Western good life, huh? But pulling a stunt like this, rigging an election, putting a puppet in charge, that ain't exactly going to win them any points with Brussels or Washington, is it?
Not at all. It's a massive setback for their aspirations. The EU and the US are watching this whole thing unfold, and they're not impressed.
But they're not going to send in troops, right? It's not like Georgia's sitting on a mountain of oil or anything.
Direct military intervention is off the table, most likely. But they got other ways to punish bad behavior. Sanctions, cutting off aid, maybe even a diplomatic freeze-out, that kind of thing.
And that whole one candidate thing, that's got to be making the West pretty damn uncomfortable. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement for democracy.
Yeah, it makes Georgia look less like a democracy and more like, well, a lot of other places that ain't exactly known for their human rights record.
And while the West's wringing their hands, Putin's probably sitting back and laughing his ass off, right?
Oh, you betcha. A weak Georgia. A divided Georgia. That's exactly what Russia wants. It makes it easier for them to pull the strings behind the scenes.
All right, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. The Georgian Dream Party saying, hey, we followed our own constitution, we changed the rules, we had an election, what's the big deal?
That's their story, and they're sticking to it. But it's pretty thin, man. You strip the president of power, then you rig the system to get your guy in. That's not exactly how democracy's supposed to work.
It's like saying, hey, we totally let you vote, but we also made sure your vote didn't count for shit.
It's a shell game, and the international community sees right through it. There's been a lot of pushback, a lot of countries saying, we ain't recognizing this Kavlashvili guy as the real president.
So basically, Georgia's stuck with two presidents. One's got the title but no power, and the other's got the backing of the ruling party but no legitimacy on the world stage. What a mess.
Yeah, it's a recipe for instability. And the big question now is, where the hell does Georgia go from here? Can they fix this, or are they headed down a dark path?
Makes you think, man. What's the point of even having elections if the outcome's already decided? Is this the future of politics? Or is this just Georgia being Georgia?
It's a sobering thought. But remember, people ain't powerless. They can push back, they can protest, they can make their voices heard.
Georgians have done it before. Remember the Rose Revolution back in 2003? They kicked out a corrupt president then. Maybe they can do it again.
There's always hope. But it's going to be a tough fight. The ruling party's got a tight grip on things, and they ain't afraid to play duty.
So what should we be watching for? What are the signs that things are getting even worse?
Keep an eye on the protests. Are they growing? Are they getting more violent? That's a sign of how much pressure's building up.
And what about the media? If they start cracking down on journalists, that's a bad sign.
Big time. A free press is essential for a healthy democracy. If the government starts shutting down dissenting voices, you know they're trying to control the narrative.
What about the courts? Any chance they'll step in and stop this madness?
Sometimes, the courts actually become a tool for the ruling party. They use them to punish their enemies and protect their friends. So if you see sham trials, politically motivated verdicts, that's a huge red flag.
So if Georgia starts looking like some dystopian nightmare where everyone's too scared to speak up, then we know things have gone to shit.
That's about the size of it. And don't forget about the economy. Corruption thrives in these kind of places. Money that should be going to schools and hospitals ends up in the pockets of the powerful.
Higher taxes, fewer jobs, infrastructure crumbling. It's a recipe for disaster.
It's a downward spiral. Political instability leads to economic hardship, which leads to more anger and unrest, which gives the government an excuse to tighten their grip even more.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So where does this leave Georgia? What are the possible outcomes here?
Well, there are a few scenarios. The worst one is that the Georgian Dream Party just steamrolls the opposition and turns Georgia into a full-blown dictatorship, like Putin's Russia, but with better wine.
Ugh, that's depressing. What else we got?
There's the optimistic scenario, though it's a long shot. The protests get bigger, the international pressure ramps up, and the ruling party's forced to back down. Maybe they even hold new elections, fair ones this time. It's not impossible, but it would take a miracle.
So a tiny glimmer of hope. And the third option.
The third option's the messiest.
Yeah.
Prolonged instability, maybe even violence. A stalemate where nobody wins, and Georgia just becomes a failed state. Another cautionary tale in the history books.
So basically, it's a choose-your-own-adventure where all the endings suck.
It's a reminder that democracy's a fragile thing. It needs to be nurtured, protected, and when it breaks down, the consequences can be brutal.
All right, so we've talked about the politics, the global fallout, and the different ways this whole thing could play out. But what does it actually mean for the people living in Georgia? What are their lives going to be like in the middle of all this chaos? Let's ditch the highfalutin political crap and get down to brass tacks. What does this clusterfuck mean for everyday Georgians just trying to get by?
It means their lives are about to get a whole lot harder.
We're not talking theoretical bullshit here. This is real life, bread and butter stuff, jobs, healthcare, education.
Exactly. And freedom, too. The freedom to speak your mind without worrying about disappearing in the middle of the night.
That's what democracy is supposed to guarantee. Right. But when you've got a government more interested in power than in serving the people,
those rights go out the window faster than a politician's promise.
So what are the warning signs? What should folks be looking for to know if shit's really hitting the fan?
Watch the media, man. Are independent journalists getting silenced? Are they being replaced with state-run propaganda?
That's classic dictator playbook 101. Control the information, control the people.
Bingo. And pay attention to the courts. Are they handing down fair verdicts? Or are they just another tool for the ruling party to punish their enemies?
If your country starts looking like some kangaroo court, you know things are fucked.
No doubt. And then there's the economic fallout. Corruption goes through the roof in these situations.
So more taxes, less jobs, roads that'll rattle your teeth loose. It's a recipe for a total societal meltdown.
It is, and it's a vicious cycle. Political instability leads to economic hardship, which leads to more unrest, which gives the government an excuse to crack down even harder.
Depressing as hell, man. So where does this leave Georgia? What's the end game?
Nobody knows for sure. It's a fork in the road, and the wrong turn could lead them straight off a cliff.
All right, Professor, lay it on us. What are the possible scenarios?
Well, the worst case scenario is that the Georgian Dream Party just cements their power and turns the country into a full-blown dictatorship.
Like Putin's Russia, but with better food.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Then there's the optimistic scenario, but don't get your hopes up. The protests could gain traction, international pressure could force the government to back down, and maybe, just maybe, they hold new elections.
A glimmer of hope. I like it. What's the third option?
The third option is the wild card. Chaos, prolonged instability, maybe even violence. A stalemate where nobody wins and Georgia just becomes another failed state.
So no matter how you slice it, things are looking pretty grim for Georgia.
It's a stark reminder that democracy's not a given. It's got to be fought for, protected, and when it breaks, the fallout can be catastrophic.
Well, folks, there you have it. The inside scoop on Georgia's political meltdown. It's a story about power, corruption, and the fragility of freedom. It's a complicated situation with no easy answers. But it's a story we all need to pay attention to because, at the end of the day, this ain't just about Georgia. It's about the future of democracy itself. So stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let the bastards grind us down. That's all for today's deep dive. We'll be back soon with more tales from the twisted world of global politics. Until then, peace out.